Welcome back to Movie Synopsis. Today I will show you a sci-fi romance drama film from 2016 titled Passengers. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The interstellar spaceship Avalon voyages toward the colonized planet Homestead 2. Its chambers vacant as it navigates through space. Encountering an asteroid belt, the ship's shields falter, necessitating a diversion of power to reinforce defenses. Despite efforts, a collision with a massive asteroid is inevitable, causing widespread system malfunctions. As the ship initiates self-repairs, a hibernation pod unexpectedly activates, introducing a new element of uncertainty. The roused passenger is Jim Preston, a skilled mechanical engineer. As his pod opens, an automated system assists in his awakening, informing him of his 120-year slumber and the ship's proximity to Homestead 2, a mere 4 months away. Promised the chance to relish the ship's luxurious amenities during this time, Jim is briefed on his ID band, accommodations, and scheduled activities leading up to planetfall. Eager yet apprehensive about interacting with fellow passengers, he prepares himself, exits his cabin, and enters an automated classroom designed for group learning sessions. Jim's unease grows as the holographic presentation depicts Earth as overcrowded, overpriced, and overrated. Despite being instructed to withhold questions until the end, Jin persistently queries why he's the sole attendee. Realizing the hologram's limitations, Jin sets out in search of fellow passengers. Arriving at the ship's central concourse, he finds it deserted, except for an automated information kiosk, which offers assistance. Disappointed by the lack of human interaction, Jin insists on speaking with a live steward. However, his quest for companionship proves fruitless as he discovers no one present. Determined to unravel the mystery, Jin presses on, demanding to speak with the captain. Though denied access to the bridge, Jin peeks inside, confirming his suspicions. None of the main crew members are awake either. Jim's quest for answers leads him to the observatory, where he discovers the sobering truth. The ship remains a staggering 90 years away from Homestead 2. Realizing his premature awakening, Jim hastens back to the concourse. Desperate for guidance, he sends a distress signal to Earth, seeking advice on how to return to hibernation, only to learn that a response would take an estimated 55 years due to exorbitant communication costs. Crushed by the realization of his predicament, Jim wanders aimlessly until he stumbles upon the ship's bar, where he encounters another individual. As he engages in conversation with the bartender, Jim senses an underlying strangeness about him. As Jim approaches the bar to order a drink, he discerns something peculiar about the bartender. It's an android named Arthur. Intrigued yet perplexed by Arthur's presence, Jim grapples with the impossibility of his existence ahead of schedule. The following day, Jim awakens in his cabin, determined to address the malfunction in his hibernation chamber. Venturing to the cantina, he's confronted with the stark reality of class distinctions, as most menu items are reserved exclusively for gold-class passengers. Resigned to a plain coffee, Jim contemplates his next move. Armed with tools, he endeavors to repair his hibernation pod, but despite his efforts, the chamber remains inert when he lies inside. Frustrated and bewildered, Jim confronts the daunting prospect of his uncertain fate aboard the ship. Despite his efforts to access the crew's hibernation chambers, Jim's attempts are futile, and the ship continues to experience minor malfunctions. Seeking solace, Jim frequents the bar, finding companionship in conversations with Arthur. The android offers counsel, prompting Jim to contemplate breaking into a gold classroom to inject some excitement into his solitary existence. Jim indulges in the ship's amenities, exploring various restaurants, games, and entertainment options. However, as time passes, his isolation weighs heavily on him, exacerbating his misery. One fateful day, in a drunken stupor, Jim wanders near the hibernation pods and stumbles upon an airlock containing spacesuits. Driven by a reckless impulse, Jim dons a suit and activates the airlock, propelling himself into the vacuum of space. As Jim floats weightlessly outside the ship, he is captivated by the awe-inspiring vista before him. Realizing he is the sole conscious observer of this cosmic spectacle, releasing the magnets securing him to the ship, he drifts aimlessly in the void, overwhelmed by a profound sense of desolation. Returning inside, Jim sheds his spacesuit but finds himself drawn back to the airlock, devoid of protective gear. With a heavy heart, He contemplates ending his existence, but hesitates at the last moment. Rushing back into the ship, he slips on a discarded bottle, jolting him back to reality. As he rises, his gaze falls upon a woman in one of the hibernation pods, Aurora. Intrigued, Jim delves into her files, listening to her passenger interview and finding himself inexplicably drawn to her. As time passes, Jim remains seated beside Aurora's pod, engrossed in her interviews. In the bar, he immerses himself in her writings, discussing her work with Arthur, the android bartender. Obsessed with the irony of his situation, Jim reflects on the cruel twist of fate, seeking a better life on a distant planet, only to awaken prematurely and find his perfect companion just beyond his reach. As he contemplates waking Aurora from hibernation, Jim grapples with the moral dilemma. Discussing his dilemma with Arthur, the android fails to comprehend the complexity of Jim's predicament. If Jim were to awaken Aurora for his own selfish desires, he would condemn her to the same fate stranded aboard the ship, facing an uncertain future. As time passes, Jim wrestles with his decision regarding Aurora's fate, unable to shake the notion of companionship. Eventually, he resolves to awaken her, unable to resist the longing for connection. Sneaking away as she undergoes the awakening process, Jim retreats to his quarters, torn between anticipation and anxiety. When Aurora finally emerges from her pod, disoriented and bewildered, Jim guides her to the main concourse, hoping to provide answers. Together, they journey to the observatory, where Jim reveals the grim truth. They are the only conscious beings aboard the ship, with no means of accessing crucial systems or contacting the crew. Aurora, overwhelmed by panic, insists on returning to her pod, but Jim gently informs her of their predicament. They are stranded with no hope of returning to hibernation. Returning to the concourse, Jim suggests to Aurora that she should rest, considering her recent emergence from hibernation. Touched by his empathy, Aurora expresses sympathy for Jim's solitary ordeal over the past year. Consumed by regret for his impulsive actions, Jim retreats to the bar, grappling with the consequences of his decision. He implores Arthur to keep his involvement in Aurora's awakening a secret. The following day, Aurora emerges from her rest and seeks information about the hibernation pods. Jim accompanies her to the concourse, and they proceed to have breakfast together. As they exit, they witness a malfunction in the automated information desk. In the cantina, Aurora notices Jim's repetitive breakfast routine and upgrades his meal to a gold-class menu, sparking conversation about repairing the pods. While Jim contemplates giving up hope, Aurora remains determined to find a solution, unwilling to accept their fate. As Aurora tirelessly searches the infirmary and delves into research documents, her quest for a solution leads her to the crew's hibernation quarters, where she attempts to force open the doors. Meanwhile, Jim observes an increase in malfunctions throughout the ship, signaling the deteriorating state of their environment. In moments of introspection, Aurora reflects on her predicament aboard the Avalon. She fills her days with writing, exercise, and swimming, gradually coming to terms with the reality of their situation. Seeking distraction, she turns to Jim for an interview in the cantina, hoping to uncover the story behind his immigration to the colony. Initially reciting corporate slogans, Jim eventually reveals his deeper motivations. He yearned for the chance to carve out a new identity and build a meaningful life on the new world. As they share their hopes and dreams, a bond begins to form between them, united by their shared longing for a brighter future amidst the vast expanse of space. In the quiet solitude of the observatory, Aurora finally reveals the purpose behind her journey aboard the Avalon. Unlike the other passengers, she possesses a round-trip ticket, her ambition being to travel to Homestead 2, spend a year there, and return to Earth. Her ultimate goal is to make history as the first journalist to accomplish such a feat, crafting the greatest story ever told. As Aurora begins to resign herself to their plight, Jim takes it upon himself to lift her spirits. He introduces her to moments of joy and diversion, whisking her away to dance, to the cinema, and to the basketball court, infusing their days with a sense of normalcy and camaraderie. Finally, Jim brings Aurora to the bar to meet Arthur, the android bartender. In this unexpected encounter, they find a semblance of companionship and solace. Seeking redemption, he immerses himself in a project, eventually presenting Aurora with a miniature Chrysler building, a heartfelt gesture meant to lift her spirits. Their bond deepens as they share a date at the bar, indulging in dinner and swapping stories from their past. Aurora opens up about the loss of her father during her teenage years, revealing a vulnerable side to her. After dinner, Jim leads Aurora to the airlock, where they don spacesuits in a moment of shared resolve. With determination in their hearts, they prepare to face the unknown together, united in their quest for survival and the hope of a brighter future beyond the confines of the Avalon. As Jim and Aurora embark on a spacewalk together, they share the awe-inspiring experience of floating weightlessly in the cosmos. Their bond deepens as they return inside, sharing a kiss and spending the night together in Jim's cabin. Soon, they settle into life as a couple, exploring the ship and enjoying simple pleasures like jogging and dining together. Jim surprises Aurora with flowers from the hydroponics bay, and they celebrate her birthday with a special dinner followed by drinks at the bar. Jim slips away to the washroom to prepare the ring he crafted for Aurora, leaving her chatting with Arthur in the bar. Unaware that Jim had instructed Arthur to keep their secret, the android inadvertently reveals Jim's role in Aurora's awakening. Aurora is stunned and confronts Jim upon his return, her disbelief turning to fury and panic as she flees the bar. Returning to his cabin, Jim discovers that Aurora has left, taking all her belongings with her. The next day, he encounters her in the cantina, but she bolts at the sound of his voice, unable to face him in her distress. Aurora, consumed by rage, confronts Jim in his cabin one night, furious over his deception. Despite his attempts to apologize and explain, she refuses to forgive him for taking away her future. Later, as Jim steps into the elevator, it malfunctions, adding to the ship's growing list of issues. Meanwhile, Aurora enters the main concourse and is surprised to find Jim has planted a tree there. Their paths converge at the cantina, where they encounter another malfunction with the food dispensary. Suddenly, they hear the voice of the deck chief over the comms, inquiring about the tree. Rushing to the concourse, they find Gus Mancuso inspecting Jim's tree. After introductions, they explain the situation to the chief, who is puzzled by the multiple pod failures. Mancuso leads them to the bridge, where they discover anomalies in the ship's systems, necessitating a manual inspection to uncover the root cause of the malfunctions. Exiting the bridge, Aurora and Jim narrowly dodge a falling robot, prompting them to inform Mancuso about the increasing frequency of malfunctions across the ship. Concerned, Mancuso instructs them on collecting data to investigate further. While Mancuso checks on the pods, Jim joins him and deduces the cause of Aurora's pod malfunction. The deck chief condemns Jim's actions as terrible. Later, on the bridge, Aurora joins Jim as he reviews the collected data, discussing the situation with her pod. Despite his efforts, Jim informs Aurora that he's unable to rectify the issue. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of yet another malfunctioning robot. Feeling the onset of hibernation sickness, Mancuso excuses himself to rest, but as he leaves, he coughs up blood, indicating a deteriorating health condition. As Aurora struggles to sleep, she seeks solace in a late-night swim. Suddenly, gravity loss engulfs the ship, causing her to nearly drown as the water from the pool shifts uncontrollably. Just in time, the gravity drive resets, sparing her life. Aurora and Jim coincidentally cross paths while rushing to find Mancuso. Together, they converge at the bridge, determined to uncover the root cause of the ship's malfunctions. Mancuso discerns that a major system failure occurred 2 years prior, triggering the current cascade of issues. With the entire ship strained to compensate for the malfunction, they realize the urgent need to locate and repair the source of the failure before it jeopardizes the Avalon's survival. Facing the threat of total stranding, Jim, Aurora, and Mancuso urgently seek to resolve the ship's issues. However, Mancuso's deteriorating health forces them to prioritize his care. After his passing, he entrusts Jim with his ID bracelet, urging them to fix the ship. As they mourn, the ship's condition worsens, prompting Jim to rally Aurora's help. But their progress is hindered by more failures, including one affecting Arthur, whom Jim deactivates. They press on in a race against time to save the Avalon. Arriving in engineering, Jim and Aurora diligently search for the source of the ship's problems, pinpointing it to the power plant. However, their efforts are abruptly halted when Aurora is sucked into a breach caused by the asteroid impact. Determined to save her, Jim holds on desperately until he too is pulled in. Despite the chaos, they manage to seal the breach in the hull just in time. Their relief is short-lived as Jim discovers multiple breaches in the hull. Following the meteor's trajectory, they locate the damaged reactor control computer. Jim resolves to find replacement parts, determined to restore the ship's functionality and ensure their survival. After finding and replacing the damaged part, Jim and Aurora encounter further setbacks when the process of venting the reactor fails repeatedly. Jim realizes that manually opening the vent door from outside the ship may be their only option to cool down the reactor. Both of them prepare to venture into space. But before Jim heads out, he entrusts Aurora with Mancuso's bracelet, acknowledging the danger he faces. With Aurora's assistance, Jim dons his suit and prepares to exit the airlock. But before he leaves, Aurora implores him to return, expressing her inability to bear the thought of losing him. With a heavy heart, Jim steps into the void of space, leaving Aurora to confront the critical situation in the reactor alone. As Jim approaches the vent from the outside, Aurora is struck by a bolt from the reactor, injuring her arm. Inside the reactor room, the temperature continues to rise as Jim attempts to bypass the vent door. Realizing the only option is to manually hold the door open, he communicates the plan to Aurora, who is hesitant. Despite Aurora's reluctance, Jim proceeds with the plan, emphasizing the necessity of saving the other occupants of the ship. Tensions escalate as they argue, but Jim remains resolute in his decision. With no other choice, Aurora initiates the venting process. The plan succeeds, but the intense fumes from the reactor push Jim away, breaking his tether and causing his suit's pressure to drop dangerously. After Jim shares what happened, Aurora rushes to retrieve another suit to rescue him. Despite his apologies, donning the suit, she flies out, but finds her tether too short. In a desperate move, she grabs onto Jim's tether, managing to pull him back to safety. However, upon reaching the infirmary, they discover Jim's lifeless body. Refusing to accept his death, Aurora uses Mancuso's bracelet to override the medical protocols and successfully resuscitates Jim. In a moment of forgiveness, Aurora reconciles with Jim. Together, they repair Arthur and honor Mancuso with a proper space burial. Later, Jim reveals to Aurora his plan to repurpose the medical pod as a hibernation chamber, suggesting she use it to safely endure the remainder of their journey. However, Aurora ultimately decides to remain awake with him aboard the ship, choosing companionship over hibernation as they face the unknown together. After 88 years aboard the Avalon, the crew awakens on Homestead 2 to find the ship in an unexpected state. Aurora leaves them a message, recounting the extraordinary life she and Jim shared while the others slept peacefully. Despite the challenges and uncertainties they faced, Aurora reflects on the love and companionship that sustained them throughout their journey, leaving a poignant testament to their remarkable legacy aboard the Avalon. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.